My name's Noel. I'm a psychotherapist. Welcome to today's video blog. I'm going to look at some clinical aspects of paranoia and delusional thinking, what it is, how it presents, and what you can do about it. So I'm going to jump right into, what is paranoia, as opposed to just being suspicious. As sort of clinically what it is. It's a very intense sense of anxiety or fearful or suspicious feelings on the part of someone, and most often it's associated with a belief about persecution or conspiracy or threat in some sense. Paranoia as a mental disorder, as opposed to somebody just feeling very anxious about something or worried about something, usually comes with other mental disorders. Not always, but often you'll find it in other mental disorders, and most often in what we call psychotic disorders, where people have hallucinations, hear or see or smell things that are not there. Paranoia itself can develop into delusions, and you often get paranoia, which is the suspicious, hypervigilant stuff, as well as delusions, which are irrational beliefs and thoughts that become very, very fixed, even if evidence, reality challenges it. And it's very difficult to convince the person that their delusions are incorrect. So when paranoia and delusions exist with no other symptoms, such as hearing things or smelling things that are not there, sort of hallucinations, it may be that the person has delusional disorder as well. So somebody with this type of disorder can function, but in a very, very limited way, because obviously they're very worried about things, so they isolate and avoid. Those are the primary defences, and also can appear very confusing and irrational and frightening, and be very suspicious and even aggressive. So often, will present in a very antisocial manner. So what are the signs of paranoia then, if you think that somebody who has it? So it's an intense irrational suspicion or mistrust. Really is quite fixed and rigid. There's a sense of fear and anger often, so fear and anger go together, and a sense of betrayal in interpersonal relationships. There's hypervigilance, so the person can never sit still. They're always scanning the room, listening out for things, and intense questioning comes with that. Very difficult for the individual involved to forgive either real or perceived slights, betrayals, etc. They all form evidence and are held on to as part of the delusion and the paranoia. The person involved will often hide their motives, and sort of be very, very intensely suspicious of people asking them questions about what's going on, and be very suspicious of being taken advantage of in many ways. So we'll always be talking about somebody trying to get one over on them, for example. And the person involved will also be very, very argumentative about even the smallest of things. So what causes it? It's there's sort of a general breakdown in some mental functioning, but specifically involves reasoning and linking reasoning to meaning. So it's misinterpretation of events and happenings, and the reasons for this breakdown and this sort of cognitive functioning, if you like, vary. It may be through projected or repressed feelings from relationships, early trauma, for example, or it's related to an event in life that has happened later on in life that maybe increases somebody's isolation, and then they get into a paranoid and often delusional state of mind around that, which then is a vicious cycle, because that sort of inhibits the ability to seek help and then use the help when it's found. So what is a delusion then? So that's what causes paranoia, some event, some chemical breakdown in the mind, some early trauma in childhood, etc. So what's a delusion with that? Well, a delusion is a set of beliefs that somebody holds that is not open to being reasoned with or challenged with alternative evidence or facts. I mean, the most common, I suppose, are things such as delusions of grandeur or persecutory delusions. The delusions of grandeur are often the one people have come across. Many people can be grandiose in some ways, but delusions of grandeur involve special powers, special place in the world. Sort of some of the classic symptoms are believing that you are related to a deity or the son of God, or you're a king or queen, etc., etc. Those are delusions of grandeur, so you have special powers in that sense, or persecutory delusions. So we want to just sort of segue off a bit into sort of thinking about belief systems that may be culturally based. Somebody may believe something that you disagree with culturally, but they're not deluded in that. That's a cultural belief. So religious beliefs, for example, come into that. I don't want to step into that territory because it can be triggering for some people. But whether or not somebody has a religious belief is often culturally determined and is not a mental health issue as such. So a delusion will persist even if there is lots of strong contrary evidence. So how do we treat delusions and paranoia? Well, there are two main ways of treating them. One is through medication, and often to be able to enable the psychotherapy approach, which is most often cognitive behavioural therapy. To enable that, often the first step is to look at sort of medication approaches, which would be sort of anti-anxiety medications, or maybe an atypical antipsychotic, for example. You would need to sort of seek appropriate medical sort of information and help around that. So go and see a psychiatrist. It's unlikely that your general practitioner would be able to help with that. You'd be looking at a psychiatric referral. Once the sort of medication is in place, then it is possible to do the longer term sort of psychological therapy, and it would be longer term work. It's quite slow and laborious, the work with somebody who has sort of paranoia and delusions. It takes a while, but it can be managed through the use of cognitive behavioural therapy. And you can teach people sort of much better coping skills around that. And by teaching somebody better coping skills around that, and also by teaching them things like balanced thinking, to learn sort of step by step how to measure the reality of a thought or not, by looking at evidence for and against, you can sort of give somebody better sort of interpersonal, better social skills. And ultimately that sort of engagement in the wider world, developing new relationships and friendships, etc., is what does the healing for people. So that's where you're aiming with all of this, is to break down that isolation and allow somebody to integrate back into the world. So if you're worried about somebody that you know possibly presenting with this, do get in touch, or get in touch with somebody who's trained in this area of work. You can give me a call, 07506 319 745. If you're calling from outside the UK, drop off the first 0 and add a +44. Or you can email me, info@noelmcdermott.net. That's info@noelmcdermott.net. I hope that's been useful. It's sort of been a bit dry, I think, but I think it's important to just get some information across. It's very debilitating for people who experience sort of this extreme form of paranoia and anxiety and delusional thinking. But the good news is that help is available by trained practitioners. So do get in touch if you're worried about somebody. Do look after yourself, and I wish you good mental health. Do leave me commentary at the end of the video, or on the website if you're watching it there, because I hope these videos are helpful, and I only know that if you let me know whether it's useful or how I can improve them. Thanks for dropping by. Great to see you, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.